What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. So you all know how I feel when it comes to reboots, remakes. We know that, and I think sometimes when it comes to long-term gaps, when we talk about a sequel, I can go on either side of the aisle. And like, for example, with Top Gun, did we ever expect that we were going to get a Top Gun sequel? Even though there were talks for years about it, I don't think anyone ever really thought it was going to happen until it did happen. And many of us thought, is this really going to be any good? And it in fact was pretty good. I think though that set a lot of studios up for potential failure, thinking that they could do the same, thinking that they could allow such a large gap of time go by. And whether you loved Top Gun, the original film, liked it, whatever, it is one of those staple films for its time, and I think has carried on since then. Again, product of its time. When you watch it now thinking it's 2025, this looks horrible, and when you actually know the background and how they made the film, especially all the dogfighting sequences, a lot of those were the same shots, just slightly angled differently, cut differently. If you actually go read and watch exactly how they did that, because back then the Navy was not allowing them to really get entrenched into how they do things, how they fly their maneuvers or techniques, unlike what happened with the sequel. They actually allowed them to come in and do some of those things. Now here we have Shaun of the Dead. Shaun of the Dead, I think, is again one of those staples. It's not an iconic horror comedy or horror film when you think about we'll call them the Mount Rushmore icons. Let's say like Leatherface, Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers. I think some people can even argue for like Ghostface, Chucky. I mean, the list goes on, okay? But Shaun of the Dead is one of those, I think, staple foundational horror comedies, especially in that subgenre, for the time it was filmed, and it is still beloved by many people, and definitely has a hard cult following. Now here we have Simon Pegg explains why he'll never return for a Shaun of the Dead sequel. Now I think that's good. I don't think everything needs a sequel. I don't think everything needs to be rebooted, remade. Sometimes just leave the original film alone. Now we do know some other ones that aren't necessarily horror, like for example, they're going to try and do another Goonies. They're going to do a Goonies sequel. I don't think that's needed, especially when you're going to try to bring back that original cast. Why? That doesn't make any sense to me. And now they're trying to finally follow through with a live action Gremlins 3. I don't think that's necessary either. And there's even been talks in the same breath of trying to reboot the original Gremlins to make it more of what it was originally going to be, which was a gore-centric horror film. And I believe it was Steven Spielberg came in and convinced them otherwise, that, oh, that's not going to be very family friendly. And they removed all that gore. We actually covered that on a couple other horror news updates over the past few months. So let's get into the details of this as to why Simon says he's never going to return for a Shaun of the Dead sequel. I do enjoy this film. It's not a film I watch often, but every so often I think, oh, I'm gonna watch Shaun of the Dead. It's been a while. I like the movie. Put it on, maybe background noise, maybe just something, just again, while I'm doing something else, just have playing. But other than that, it's not one I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go watch Shaun of the Dead like once a month. It's not one of those types of films for me. So here we are. Last year marked the 20-year anniversary of Edgar Wright's zombie comedy Shaun of the Dead, which paved the way for Wright to become a top filmmaker in Hollywood and also introduced Simon Pegg and Nick Frost to American audiences. The trio re-teamed on Hot Fuzz, another great movie, not a horror movie, but still a great movie, and The World's End. But what about a sequel to Shaun of the Dead? Fans of the horror comedy have been begging for a follow-up since the film was released in 2004, but Pegg explains why it'll likely never happen in a Reddit AMA this afternoon. Pegg explains, I think it's best left alone. I don't think there's any point in rebooting it. Some stories just have a beginning, middle, and end. And the trouble with sequels sometimes is that you have to undo the resolution of the original film in order to start another story. With films like Mission Impossible or the kind of superhero genre or Star Trek, it works because it's a continuing adventure, he continues. But with Shaun of the Dead, Shaun has an arc that he starts somewhere and ends somewhere. and we're happy with the way that ends. And I think, and that think sometimes when you realize a film like that, you can end up spoiling the original, because when you watch the original again, you're thinking, well, they're gonna go through this other thing. The resolution stops having any meaning. Let's see. He ends the response on a definitive note. So no is the answer to that question. Glad he's taken that stance. I'm glad he's seeing, I think, what a lot of studios overlook. Not so much the creators, not so much the actors, but I think a lot of studios tend to overlook that you have a beginning, middle, and end. That's the story. That's the character story. It had a great conclusion. There's no need to keep pushing it along, because to his point, especially the way Shaun of the Dead ended with Nick Frost, had turned a zombie. He's sitting there playing video games with Shaun. 20 years later, where are you gonna bring that story to? Shaun's married, has kids, and he's still keeping his friend locked up in the shed or the garage playing video games? Or are you going to somehow try to explain how he and many of the other infected evolved and now they're part of society? It just wouldn't make sense, and there's no need to ruin the original film. Edgar Wright had a similar answer to the same question back in 2021. He told SFX magazine, I haven't gone back to horror comedy because with Shaun of the Dead, I felt like I had said much of what I wanted to say with that movie. The thing is that films take so long to make. I think that's the thing that fans don't quite understand sometimes. They'll say, why don't you knock out a Shaun sequel? It's like these films take 3 years to make. You've got to really, really love to do it. So because films take longer to make, trying to challenge yourself with a different subject matter or something you haven't done before, it's always the real motivator. And that's where the article ends. So even he's on board with not wanting to do a Shaun sequel, and it really seems like he doesn't even want to go back to horror comedy, which I think is a mistake, not a mistake. I mean, I'm not a big horror comedy fan. Let me take that back. I've said this a million times. I'm not big on comedy in horror. I do accept horror comedies like Shaun of the Dead. I enjoy that. Now, if you're going to give me something like Terrifier, don't think I need to have comedy in it. That's just me. I'm watching that for the more serious aspect of horror and gore, not inserted comedy. So again, that's my take. That's my opinion. So anyways, that's going to do it for this horror news update. Simon Pegg not wanting to do a sequel, will not return for a sequel for Shaun of the Dead. And I highly doubt, it's been 20 years. Actually a little over 20 years, 21 years now. I highly doubt we're ever going to get a sequel to this. I can possibly see them trying to reboot this, remake this at some point, but as far as a sequel goes, I'm glad to see that's out of the question. So drop a comment in the comment section. Let us know what you think. Are you happy to hear that a classic like Shaun of the Dead will not be getting a sequel? Or were you one of those maybe large few who are looking forward to the possibility of a sequel to see how that story continues? Again, drop a comment in the comment section. And if you haven't done so already, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, we'll see you at the next one. Later.